In this session today, we're going to talk about customer-centric AI. Now, we all know what artificial intelligence is. We're seeing it wherever we look and wherever we are in digital. It literally is becoming part and parcel of everyday digital life. But is it always customer centric? I think for a lot of us, the answer almost certainly is no. It's driven by the technology, it's driven by, I guess, sort of very much an artificial feeling and a non human kind of centric approach. And that's what we need to really be retaining as we look into the future and try and really embrace the opportunities that are coming through with artificial intelligence. And this is really where we're seeing an emergence of personalization meeting ethics. So we're going to discover as we go through this conversation today how AI can enhance your customer's journey, because all customers are going through a journey with your products and your brands and your services, at the same time respecting their privacy and also their personal preferences. So it's going to be almost getting the best of the best in terms of input and output. So you're going to be inputting, amazing AI enhanced content and information and experiences. And from the customer's perspective, they are going to be getting a much more personalized, almost to the point of, and there's a new phrase on the block now, hyper personalization. They're going to be getting so much more value from that. So we're going to look at how we can use AI to drive personalization whilst remaining transparent, fair, and compliant. In other words, doing this in the right way, in a wholesome way. And we're going to cover some practical strategies. We're going to look at a variety of different tools. I've got a few case studies to share with you, which are varying points in the customer journey, because this applies at all touch points that you have with your customer. And the aim ultimately really here is to balance the commercial value that we're getting from AI. So the speed of things with customer trust. So we can do a lot of stuff now with AI. We can do things at scale. We can do things really efficiently, but we don't want to be losing the customer's trust. We don't want to appear as non-authentic. We don't want to appear as just doing stuff for the sake of it because we can. We need to make sure this is quality over quantity. And that's going to be a real theme that we're going to cover as we go through this conversation. So, what do we mean by customer-centric AI? That's obviously a good and important starting point. It's really where we are adapting AI to individual needs, to behaviors and preferences of our customers without compromise. So without compromising their autonomy or privacy settings that they might have already put in place. We can't change the rules, or we shouldn't change the rules just because we're using AI. Okay, so this is going to be a focus on increasing relevance and efficiency, whilst at the same time upholding responsible marketing practice. So upholding fairness and transparency. So doing the right thing by our customer at the same time as becoming, even smarter and sharper in the way that we deliver our marketing. So the key priorities are respecting our customers' intent in their side of the relationship that they have with us, using data, particularly our customers' data, responsibly, and supporting rather than manipulating. There is a real kind of groundswell of opinion that AI is not a good thing. It takes out the human in our interactions, and it doesn't have to. That's really what we're talking about here. Customer-centric AI is doing AI, using AI, and being with AI as part of a really efficient way of serving customers without compromise. So that's a kind of a theme or a bit of a mantra that's going to go through everything that we're talking about here. And why does this matter? Why does this kind of idea of ethical personalization matter? Well, according to Cisco's recent consumer privacy survey, 81% of people are concerned about how businesses and brands are using their data. So that's 8 in every 10 people. That is a really significant number. And your customers now, at the same time as that, are expecting personalized experiences, but also at the same time expecting clear control over how the information they share as part of the experience, as part of the conversation, as part of the relationship, that it's held carefully, that it's held authentically, that it isn't going to be misused. And personalization without ethics, without this kind of really strong intent of doing responsible marketing, will reduce trust. It'll increase opt-outs, and of course, will also, particularly if you're in a regulated industry, risk legal penalties. So we've got to get this right. This is not a negotiable thing. It's not oh, we'll do it if we can or if we can make time for it. This needs to be at the center of everything that you're doing. This is important stuff. Now, as with all these things, there are various models and frameworks and systems that we can call upon to start to plan this in to our activities. And we've got 5 pillars of ethical personalization. So they're transparency, consent, relevance, control, and fairness. So, transparency. We need to be explaining why the data is being collected. And with AI, obviously, we can collect a lot more to enable that personalization. So, we need to be transparent as to why this information is important to encourage that transparent trust, if you like, in our customers' minds. Consent, making data sharing an opt-in. Now we know that, prior consent and permissions have been always, the best way of doing business. Well, now they're non-negotiable. We need to be doing it this way. So data sharing is an opt-in. A customer doesn't have to do it, but of course, the more they give, the more personalized the experience they'll get. So the more value they give to us, the more value they get back. This is a transaction. Again, it is a very simple sum. It's very simple mathematics here. The more they give, the more you get, and the more you then give back. It's very, very simple. If they're not willing to do it, okay, fine, but there's a trade-off on both sides. So it's part of your responsibility as a business owner or as a marketer or communicator to ensure that that consent, that consensual relationship is at the core of everything. Relevance, avoiding intrusive or unnecessary use of data. This is again good practice to just think, am I giving what a customer perceives as value, or am I just doing it because I can? Am I doing it and collecting and then sharing this information just because I can? Less is more. I'm a big advocate of minimalism, which is kind of almost going with the lowest common denominator, giving as much as is necessary to deliver the value that's required and that you want to be doing, but then stopping, pausing for breath, reflecting and saying, okay, that probably is enough to keep the customer happy. Control, giving users settings and opt-outs at every point in the journey. We'll look at this through some of the tools in a little while. And fairness, avoiding discriminatory targeting or exclusion. We have to be fair and equitable. So if we are targeting very diverse audiences, we have a lot of different customer avatars or personas or segments that we serve, doing it in a way that enables ethical personalization, not generalizing. Often I've been challenged in the past, way before AI, about, well, you're a marketer, so therefore, you're going to be segmenting, so that's generalizing. That's not fair. And what I would always come back with is that, yes, segmenting is important because then we can personalize. So we're actually using this data to become more fair as marketers and as brands. We want to be able to do this. And the more you give us as a customer, the more we're enabled to do that. And of course, there are regulations and legislation now that's aligned with these pillars of ethical personalization, GDPR, the ICO's data ethics guidance, and a load of other principles have been outlined and are now playing catch up with the whole AI piece, which is enabling us to do this at scale. So knowing the bare principles, those bare bones of good practice, is really important before we get into the detail of how AI then can really supercharge these efforts. So once you've got those kind of pillars in place and you're starting to think about what can I do to improve each of those 5 categories, you can then start to map ethical AI across the customer journey. So you can use AI to support customers across various touch points in the customer journey. So for example, the awareness stage, dynamic ad targeting with user consented data, for example. So that can be very, very specific. So if I see an ad from a brand X, let's just call them, and you see an ad from that same brand, we're going to get dynamic targeting. We're going to get very different kind of ads presented to us because of the information, our consensually shared data with that brand. We're going to see something different because of the experience and because of the journey and because we are possibly and potentially different personas being targeted. So there's a lovely nuance there at the awareness stage. This is again still ethical if you're doing those 5 pillars, because this is doing it in the right way, but it opens up an opportunity to get really personal. Remember, I use that phrase, hyper personalized. This is where it comes in here. At the consideration stage of the customer journey, we can do predictive content or product recommendations. Now, you know that to be true. Let's face it, most of us are using the likes of Amazon and Netflix, for example, and that is dynamic predictive content. We know as Amazon, we know what our customers are looking at, and we will then present them with predictive content that is actually using AI to serve them up with, well, customers who have also looked at this, and they like this because you've chosen that. And so it's this dynamic kind of dance, if you like, with customer experience at the consideration stage. And of course, product recommendations, brilliant because you can serve additional cross-sell, upsell products that go in line with the product that the customer is already considering. So they've clicked on that product because that's what they came for. And now, using AI in an ethical way, you can serve up recommendations of things that would also add more value to that journey or that purchase, if you like. And then the purchase phase of the customer journey, real-time offers, an intelligent user or customer experience at that purchase stage. Because if you can serve them up with a testimonial or a recommendation or a review that is somebody just like them, rather than just this generic person or review that you serve to everybody, then that is really, really honed in. That's hyper personalized. And that undoubtedly, according to the research, will get them more likely over the line and converting into a customer. So think about the ROI of this already. It's just gone 10x. It's probably 100x if you can get this right. Increasing that is really, really significant. And then deeper into the customer journey, the loyalty, or as I call it, the retention phase, personalized aftercare and life cycle messaging around the product or service they've purchased makes them feel both valued, but also that you really understand the experience they're going through with the product or service that they just bought from you. Hyper personalization. This is where AI can come into play. And of course, the more information they've shared, the more you can personalize in an authentic and transparent and honest way. Remember, we're still using this word ethical at all stages in here. And a lot of the tools that are available, HubSpot, Salesforce Journey Builder, for example, you can now start to build in some of these ethical principles into these tools. They enable these workflows to be plotted out. And if you're already still thinking, well, we haven't actually even plotted out our customer journeys, I've now just given you a great reason to do that. Because if you plot out every single touch point you have with a customer from that initial awareness stage through to them becoming a loyal advocate, way, way beyond the purchase point, then you stand a chance then of prioritizing where this kind of whole ethical use of AI can start to really scale up the good stuff and cut out the negative. So a great commercial opportunity as well as a good, authentic, wholesome opportunity, and morally correct marketing is going to be running hand in hand with that. So let's go a little bit more detailed into this customer journey because this stuff is important to kind of almost start making those decisions as to, well, where am I going to begin? Because I kind of maybe get it at this stage that it's important. I can kind of hear what you're saying, Neil, but where would I actually take my next steps? Well, maybe using some of the tools, maybe starting to think about some of the case studies of organizations who have done this so that you can almost put a reality around some of this theory. So let's begin at the awareness stage. So ethical audience targeting, building awareness in the customer or the prospect as they are at this stage, building awareness in their mind. So a tool could be something like meta ads. Combined with, say, smartly.io and using then consented first party data that you've captured. So you're going to be targeting people you've captured the data from, or you've bought the database of their connection details. And you're going to use customer preferences and engagement behavior here to serve tailored ads. You're avoiding lookalike audiences built on sensitive traits like age and outcome, and you're doing this at a personalized one-to-one level. This is a great opportunity to really move beyond your competition. A good example would be when Patagonia have done, and then they do, only target opted in users with sustainability focused messaging aligned with known customer values because they've done the research. So they are hyper personalizing by doing the research first and then making sure using tools like Meta Ads and Smartly.io that they are actually serving a customer who they've researched and found information on with stuff, with messaging, with product and service information that aligns with what they've captured. So they're doing research that matters. And that's really important when you have a data holding that you can actually justify why you're holding that data. To be compliant with GDPR, you need to be able to justify all of the fields of data that you hold about a customer. And this is kind of a place and a way that you can then actually say, because this is how we want to use it to personalize that experience with an ethical audience targeting approach. Then at the consideration phase, we're looking at AI content personalization. So the tools that you might think about at the consideration stage is your customers kind of thinking, oh, will we go with you guys or we're going to go with one of your competitors? So you would be then opening up Dynamic Yield or Adobe Target, for example, platforms that would deliver web content variations based on your customer or your prospects' behavior and their segmentation. So based on what's in your database or what's in Adobe Target, for example, that customer or prospect as they are, as they consider your product versus a competitor's, they are going to be served content on that landing page of that website. They're going to be served content specific to them. So they might even see their name. They will certainly see a color palette. They'll certainly see imagery. They'll certainly see a style of messaging that talks to them. Remember, hyper personalization is enabling here. This is what we're talking about here. And what is nice about that when it comes to then comparing to the competition, where it's a one size fits all landing page, where everybody lands on the same place and it's all about that brand. That's not what we're talking about here. Hyper personalization at every step in the journey enables you to differentiate away from the competition. An example is ASOS, showing different homepage content depending on the location, the gender preferences, and browsing history, and all controlled via session-based inputs rather than some form of third-party cookie invasive tracking, which has very much gone out of favor as third-party marketing, third-party cookie marketing is retired. So this is the kind of next gen, if you like, the next gen marketing when we're talking about targeting based on deep insights around these prospects as they come through and showing different content to different audiences. We've started here on this personalization journey. And then deeper into that customer's journey at the conversion stage, real-time personalization. So there are tools available, particularly if you're looking here at an e-commerce personalization. So we're assuming here that you want to be basically converting them and taking them from a prospect to being a paying customer. So actually getting the payment through here, but predicting the customer's intent based on real-time site behavior. So as they look at a particular piece of information, they click on a particular link, they go to the next page in the journey, actually serving them with very specific information and actually creating using something like made.com, offering up maybe product bundles based on browsing patterns. So in other words, if somebody's come in and seen a particular product or service, you know what other products and services, maybe accessories, maybe there's an extended warranty, or there's other stuff that can be bundled in together based on what they've looked at. They then get served at the conversion stage with always obviously an opt-out option. They get served with, interesting other things that could also add value to that basket value for you, obviously, because they're going to buy more, but also to the customer through convenience and value, and that transaction actually serving more challenge points or more pain points than they actually arrived at your site for. I mean, a great example I always kind of think of is moonpig.com. When you buy a card through moonpig.com, you're served with present ideas, you're served with a subscription option, with reminders for the same time next year, because it's likely you're going to send a card to that same person again next year. Multiple options through this kind of conversion part of the journey. So not only the product you came in to look for, but also then some of those subsidiary products and services which can also add value. And again, a lot of this served with real-time AI. And then into the loyalty stage, or retention stage, as I call it, life cycle email, particularly, and messaging. I love the way that email now can be used in here. Lots and lots of examples of brands, people like moonpig.com, who are kind of doing marketing around sensitive dates, like, say, Mother's Day or Father's Day. There's one at the moment that's happening around Father's Day where, brands who are doing ethical loyalty marketing, they know and are considering that we're talking to actually real people here. We're not going to just throw stuff at you as a customer, a loyal existing customer. We're actually going to think about, what are you doing actually in your life cycle? Where are you in that life cycle? What's going on? What sensitivities, what well-being issues could we help to address? What could we back off from if it's a sensitive point in maybe your actual life rather than the lifestyle or life cycle of the product you bought from us? Maybe there's something complex going on. If we can use AI to identify those moments and also use AI to then serve valuable information, particularly with things like opt-outs, we can then automate and nurture the flow of that relationship, building what we call in marketing CLV, customer lifetime value. So great opportunity there for enhancing the relationship, building upon it, building still this loyalty and trust, and just being the good guys really in that relationship versus a lot of the competition who are still just trying to sell you stuff because they got product they want to shift. This is a whole fundamental change to how we do marketing. This isn't about encouraging consumption. This is about doing business in the right way. And one of the things that's really serving us here, I mentioned it briefly there with this demise of third-party data, is your focus on first-party data, where, and even zero-party data, this is an interesting one. So first-party data collected from customer or user interactions, and then the idea of zero-party data provided explicitly by them through things like survey answers. There are many different tools you can use, from SurveyMonkey, Typeform, Jebbit, will collect data ethically. And this is really replacing assumptions with declared preferences from your customers. So when you're doing customer journey plotting, when you're doing your building of your target avatars or your segmentation, this is about doing it properly, authentically, and in a real sense, not just making these assumptions. Sometimes you have to make assumptions to get you off the starting blocks, but then you take the assumptions and then you test them. This is what we're talking about here, testing those assumptions using AI tools that we're talking about here to actually test against the assumptions to see whether they actually stand up in a real world sense. And if they do, you've got something to use. If they don't, it's back to the drawing board. Really important there. And what we're trying to do is, as we're going through this, and we're showing good intent to create a privacy-centric AI architecture, because as we add more and more of these AI-generated tools into play, we have a challenge here that we're actually going to almost sort of fall into our own trap, so to speak. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff coming through in a lot of both the tools and the platforms that we're describing, and some of the examples I've already given you, as well as actually on-device AI models. So, for example, Apple's on-device AI models, which are going to be analyzing before they even get to you, which they're going to be analyzing the behavior without actually transferring data to servers, for example. So in other words, you won't actually, if you're doing this properly, you won't actually see the data that wasn't required by the customer to be shared, even further upstream than you deciding, hey, we'd like that data. Well, it's actually already been opted out, or it's already gone. So a lot of these tools, if you're using the right ones, will actually do that pre-sifting, that pre-selection and filtering further upstream. So this is what's called a privacy-centric AI architecture. It's about this being built into every stage. Your choice of tools, so check their terms and conditions, check their mission statement if you're using a tool that you haven't heard of before. Check where they're coming from. Are they actually operating ethically? Will they actually pre-filter some of the stuff for you? This doesn't necessarily have to be a manual exercise you'll do, but this is about building an architecture, or sometimes you'll hear it called a tech stack, a tech AI stack of tools and platforms where they're kind of in support of your aims and your mission here. That's really important. And of course, when it comes down to more of a sort of a practical level where, okay, having done that bit upstream, it's then coming to you, you've got to be able to then manage your consent and preferences that you're seeing here. Now, we've got a number of tools. There are many, many tools available for you to sort of centralize consent capture and sort of centralize your preference control here. So OneTrust, User-Centrics, CookieBot, for example. And these are all going to be updating privacy settings in real time and then reflecting them in the plans that you've got. And what this does is it makes it both user friendly for the customer if you're using these in terms of the kind of the layer above your data warehouse, as it were, but also it makes it very user friendly for you because you've got this one-stop shop where you can go in and put all the settings in, and in real time, it's adhering to GDPR. In real time, it's actually in line with your preferences and your filters and what you want to know. So it's important that you're matching the tools, your mission and your strategy with actually the reality that the customer experiences. So consent and preference management using a tool like, say, OneTrust is a really important part of this tech stack that we are beginning to build. And what are the other tools that you might want to be sort of putting it into play here? Where there are obviously countless tools that you can bring into play. Obviously, one of the first ones that for most of us we're going to be using is something like ChatGPT. You could read across to Google Gemini, Claude, etc., etc. But we're just focusing here on GPT, for example, which you need to be thinking of really as your responsible assistant in this mix or in this tech stack. And you can be using that, as you probably already are, for generating email copy for specific segments. You can have different threads running for different personas that you're targeting so that each thread pushes content into a particular real-time database to serve a customer on a landing page that's built dynamically, etc., etc., as you build your workflows. You can use it for obviously testing tone adjustments because as customers do or don't respond to the particular messaging, it can then feed back. If you have a reciprocal feedback loop in play here, it can feed back into the GPT and say, actually, that particular piece, the customers didn't really respond to that. Can you adapt that next time for me, please? And of course, you can automate this using something like make.com. That feedback loop automated in this process, making sure that everything is customer centric at every point. You can summarize customer insights using ChatGPT. Again, you could automate that if you wanted to. So as you're getting feedback, either in your customer service or any kind of automated chatbots, ChatGPT can actually summarize those as insights and present you with a little report. And again, integrating that with make.com as a workflow enables you to maybe get a little bulletin every morning when you check in first thing. It could send you an email saying, okay, here's the customer insights from yesterday. And ChatGPT would be able to summarize those for you and send them to your inbox or wherever else you'd like. So it gives you an opportunity to be constantly, as a human, reviewing your outputs for fairness, tone, and compliance with those data privacy policies and also your brand guidelines. You don't want to be using AI and just letting it go off at its own devices. You need to be checking in. You need to be overseeing the outputs. That's obviously key. So yeah, great. Be using ChatGPT as a responsible assistant, but you're part of that journey if you're going to use it. Automate the workflows, 100% behind that, but make sure you're part of the workflow too. This isn't about giving up the responsibility and the accountability to the AI. It's about being there and managing it and kind of improving it and almost seeing it as a member of your team. If you want to be basically looking at building customer profiles using, say, real-time behavior whilst respecting their permissions, you can use something like Twilio Segment, which is another tool that you could think about using here. Others are available, and what these are sort of designed to do really are to control data flows across this tech stack to maintain governance. So, in other words, as somebody, if you can imagine an individual person comes in at the start of the journey, and you think because of all your AIs and there's all the automation, this data capture, that they're, segment A or persona Y. And then actually, as they go through a behavior, it starts to change. They're starting to exhibit different behaviors. And then actually, the AI or you realize, oh, actually, they're not who we thought they were. Look, it's actually this person. Then you can actually in real time start to position them differently or move them automated into a different segment or persona pot. So for those of you who are doing tactical campaigns, those of you who are doing kind of real-time stuff, events, campaigns, digital stuff, and you need to be acting in real time and responding, this is brilliant because this allows hyper-personalization in real time that adapts to people's behavior, not just those preconceived ideas where you think, oh yeah, that person's their persona A, that's persona B, and their persona C. If they change behaviors and you realize they're not actually who they thought you were, this is automating to get them into the correct pot so you can serve them with this high valued personalized information. So that's a really neat way of looking at this. And as you start to get into conversation with them, Octane AI is a really interesting one to look at here. And we call this kind of conversational commerce. And this is really enabling things like ethical quiz-based product recommendations, for example, in Shopify. So if you've got a store, you can actually start to sort of interact, if you like, in real time in a conversation, either using a chat bot or as part of a flow of engagement with a customer and say, kind of, okay, we've seen you've looked at this particular product. Can we just double check that this is kind of the service or the feature that you're after? Because you didn't click on that particular button there. So maybe this is a better one for you. And then you're kind of guiding the conversation, but also the customer journey in a conversation. It's almost like personal shopping, if you like. You remember that kind of concept back in the 90s where people would, have a personal shopper and you'd kind of go into store and they'd kind of walk you around the store, taking all the stuff that was really designed for you. I could never afford it, but maybe you did. I don't know. But that kind of concept of literally hand holding through the experience and guiding on a personal basis. Conversational commerce is a really cool way of kind of thinking this through. And again, something like Octane AI is a tool that enables you to do that. We're talking here personalized website, personalized commerce or e-commerce experiences. And if you want to take this really, really to heart and you really want to do this, have a look at the tool Mutiny. This is particularly for the B2B marketers amongst us, where you're able to modify the site messaging based on the company's size, its industry, or its location. And it never uses sensitive personal data. So it kind of just uses first party data, tracks the kind of activity that the person's coming in from, and then enables the tailoring of the homepage, for example, for founders versus investors. So you get a whole different spin, or it could be for buyers versus finance directors. Or it could be for sales versus marketing. So you actually get a whole different spin of the company, a whole different spin of the website based on the kind of company who's coming to your front door. And how interesting would that be? Can you imagine that in dynamic, real-time sense, actually giving a personalized website And that really is properly digital stroke AI listening, isn't it? Because if you think about it, if you were doing an elevator pitch, literally you've got five sort of, 5 seconds or 15 seconds in an elevator going between floors, and somebody says, "Oh, what do you do? Or which company do you represent?" And you've got a real short time to actually describe it. Rather than saying what you do, you use that time to ask, well, what are you doing? What are you looking for? What's your biggest pain point? And then present them with an answer that's based around their answer to your question. That's a far better way of talking because then it's all about them. This is what we call about personalization at a hyper personalized level. It isn't about you. It isn't about what you're going to say. It's about constructing and choreographing an experience that is exclusively about them. You might get a chance to drip feed some product and service information to be able to do some commerce and actually sell something, of course, but actually it's about their experience on their terms. So have a look at Mutiny for that one. It's a great example. And a lot of this you're going to want to be automating. I've already used the many tools available to do this. I've already used the example of make.com. Zapier is also a really good one here because as you start to do this, I've talked very quickly through some quite fundamental parts of marketing, like persona creation, where you probably want to be automating a little bit of how you do that on a real time level as people come through your front door, but also then how you choreograph and shape up the flow of customer journey. So where they go, click by click, step by step. And once you've plotted a generic one, then you can use something like Make or Zapier to automate that and adapt it and change it using these AI tools on a real time basis because you might not have it right. And if you don't want to be missing people because you got it wrong. And you need to be listening to make sure you know you got it wrong at the same time as let the AIs adapt it for you. But these allow you to set some rules and some triggers for what you are trying to achieve, be it a certain commercial target, or maybe it's a number of people coming through a site, or maybe it's signups for an event, or whatever it is. And ensuring that at each stage of those things that you're trying to achieve, you ensure that opt ins are respected in each of the automated tools that you're using. And you avoid over personalization that feels, well, you could argue invasive. I'd argue a little bit freaky, a little bit kind of like, oh, it's a little bit too much. You seem to know a bit too much about me. If you are inspiring that kind of feeling in your audience, it's time to pull back. So when I talk about hyper personalization, it is to the level that your customer feels impressed by, they feel is appropriate, they feel is authentic and true. If it gets to the point where your personalization and this automation gets to the point where it feels a little bit like a stalker or actually they have just captured so much about me, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that, then you've overstepped the mark. So, only following up if your customer has engaged with two or more specific content pieces, or if they have understood fully how the information that you've captured around their journey, or the route they've taken, or the content or the data they've shared with you is actually being used. If they feel comfortable, if they're getting value, you know you're onto a good thing. If they're starting to give that kind of uneasy feeling, or they're shifting around in their seat, or they're worse still, clicking off and going somewhere else, then you've blown it. Well, you haven't blown it totally because AI can help you to get it back on course because you can very quickly identify in your workflows using that technology stack that we were talking about at each step in the customer journey. You can actually identify where the problem occurred and then you can remedy that point. It might only be a single point where you see all the dropout. You might have a leaking pipe, so to speak, in the flow of water through your journey, but it might be multiple places. You might have just overdone it, but you might not. This might actually be working. And of course, a lot of this is about attribution and AI analytics. The great thing about all of these things is that if you thought with with digital and with social media and with web analytics that you had a good amount of analytics and data to work with, you have not seen anything yet because with AI, it goes to a whole new level. I've talked a lot in the past about this concept of multivariate analysis. It's a big fancy term that means AI can figure out the relationships between all the data you've got. You can't because you're human. You can spot an A/B test. You can spot that, oh, that performed better than that because I changed the image, or oh, that performed better than that because I changed the title. You can spot that because you're human. A versus B. See the difference, see the effect. AI, of course, can do multivariate because if you change two or three things, it can figure out if you've done enough of that throughput in terms of numbers of people coming through and experiencing it, or you've sent enough emails or done enough social posts, it can see the combination of changes and how those have affected the outcome. This is really interesting. If you start to plug into things like Fathom, Plausible, etc., they will start to enable platforms that go way beyond, and I'm going to use the phrase here, advisedly here, just Google Analytics. For most of us, we're still trying to get our heads around Google Analytics, let alone AI platforms. But if you want to have a little explore over what's possible, what might be achievable, then you can start to use some of the AI analytics tools. And what I always say is that this is about turning information into intelligence. Go in with the information and start to kind of look at these things to help support your key performance indicators, your KPIs. So you could be looking at the conversion lift from opted in personalization. So as soon as you do opted in personalized content, look at the lift in conversions. That could be a great KPI. On unsubscribed or opt out rates after you've done some AI, have you improved unsubscribe rates? What a great one there, because clearly you're onto a winner. Because that keeps people in the loop, in the system, in the flow, in the journey, and gives you another chance at them. Unsubscribe is the worst thing for a marketer. It's one of the worst KPIs if you're on a downward slide because you get less and a less chance of actually impressing and engaging with your marketing. You can use user trust and sentiment in your Net Promoter Score, your NPS, or in surveys that you do. That could again be another great KPI. And you can use a load of different tools for feedback loops, things like Typeform and Hotjar. Some of you may well be doing that kind of perceptual hotspot mapping on your website right now. Again, it just gives you real time, really hyper personalized, ethical kind of AI analytics that you can then use the AI, ChatGPT or others, to help you then analyze and evaluate. And of course, if you're doing this within some really clear boundaries, because you've actually, as you've been creating your tech stack, as you've developed your customer journey, as you've done the initial profiling on your customer personas, and then used AI to improve all of the above on an ongoing basis, if you document that journey, then you are going to be ensuring that you're aligned with GDPR, in the UK and in Europe. There are some US state privacy laws as well if you're listening overseas. You're going to need to really be reviewing on an ongoing basis your policies and your commitments. But if you're documenting, then you are always going to be able to then with confidence know you're on a continuous improvement journey. It is far better to have something that is in improvement, but well documented, full of evidence, time bound. You've actually time stamped every improvement or everything that you've kind of, in a good ethical way, tried to improve, honestly tried to make better. Doing responsible marketing is not about doing perfection, it's about continuous improvement. And customers will respect you for it. Nobody expects perfection. That is a little bit of a kind of a holy grail, but it's probably not achievable for any of us. But actually documenting and having some really clear guidelines that you monitor and rate yourself against on an ongoing basis, that is how you stay on the right side of the law and the regulations. So get familiar with the regulations in your territory. And if you are a regulated industry, so telecoms, pharmaceuticals, maybe you work for government, if you have regulation, make sure you know how the AI policies in those regulations could affect you. Because again, those would be nice things to have in your checklist, as it were. And dig out some case studies. There are many, many case studies that are kind of the obvious consumer ones. But you need to really be finding and translating the case studies within your sector or the sectors that you're serving. I often find that's probably a better way of doing it, the better way round, rather than thinking, what have our sort of competitors been up to? Actually, don't worry about your industry and your sectors. Think about what your customers are facing. Think about, what industries they're in or their personas and the other kinds of brands that they're encountering outside of your sector and outside of what you offer. So look a little bit more broadly, but do it customer first. This is customer-centric approach to marketing. And if you do it that way, you'll probably find some great case studies where organizations and brands, and they don't have to be the big ones, they could be smaller organizations, have just got it right. And then you can actually factor in some of that good practice. And believe me, they're going to be willing to share it. You'll see it in their blogs, you'll see it on their news pages. But again, get AI to do the deep research. Find out what it is that you're looking for by using things like Perplexity to do your deep search, or ChatGPT will be very happy to do that with you as well. So look for brands and services that are using these kinds of tools, this kind of data stacking or tech stacking rather, and this kind of ethical AI, this customer-centric AI, so that you're able to basically do this in a kind of really kind of ethical, wholesome way. That is what we're looking for here within your sector, within your industry, within the customers you're serving. So find your own. Use the AI to help you find it. There's a lot of circular stuff going on here, isn't there? And so, 5 steps to kind of begin the wrap up of this and sort of what are going to be the next stages to do. So, audit your current AI driven personalization methods. What is it you're already doing to try and personalize your experience? Establish a consent and preference management structure. We've talked about some of the tools. You can press rewind and go listen to this again to kind of get in touch with some of the tools there that will enable you to create a structure that is actually preference managed so that you're doing this collaboratively with your customers, and then map the customer journey with ethical AI layers, putting the right tools for the right reasons into the right places. You might decide you're going to just use one, but you're going to be creating workflows. And when you start to use something like Zapier, or my preferred go-to is make.com, to create the step-by-step joining up of these tools in a workflow so that one thing talks to the next, then you're going to be doing this ethically if you're doing this with this consent and preference management structure, because you're going to be asking the right questions and getting the right answers out. So select tools then that are aligned with privacy and control that you have got now in your strategy, and train everybody else as well, because there's a good chance you are going to do a lot of this yourself, but not everything is going to be achievable on your own. So train your teams on this ethical data use and AI bias awareness, because AI is not perfect either, as we know. So, whilst we as humans aren't perfect, we are biased just by our nature. We're trying to get over that, but we will be for the foreseeable. The same applies to machine learning tools. So, the AI will be feeling that too. So make sure everything gets trained, the AI is prompted well, the humans are prompted well in their own way, and then you will be on the right route to the end point that you're looking for. So a final reflection and action to pull this all together. Personalization, it can support the growth of loyalty, customer loyalty in your organization. It'll definitely improve the relevance of your storytelling, of your marketing and communications, and your relationship building. And ultimately, it will grow the relationships you've already got, but also then the bandwidth that you have for serving and scaling this up so you can do more of the good stuff to more people. That is proper growth. Ethics protects your brand. Doing this right, doing responsible marketing in this way, having this customer-centric AI approach will protect your customers and your long-term performance as well. But I would say, even though we're kind of talking big picture here and we're talking big stuff and scaling up and growing, start initially with one campaign and redesign it using the 5 pillars. Think about transparency, focus on consent, definitely focus in on relevance, manage the control, and always, always, always think about ethics, customer centricity, and fairness. And that way, you are on the route to getting your brand, your products, your services, and all of your activities, and hopefully the rest of the team around you, focused on customer-centric AI.